could get used to it. The scintillating sounds are jazzy. But we want to round you up for resumption of the Ease of Doing Business Forum. So wherever you are, I now invite you to return to your seats. Kindly return to We want to resume with the program for the morning. I now invite you to take your seats for resumption of this morning's forum. Panelists for the first dialogue, kindly be on standby. Moderator as well, Dr. Samuel, kindly stand by. If you're just joining us, welcome. For those of you watching online on the National Television Network, Government Information Service, and for those of you watching on YouTube, Facebook, joining us via the Zoom platform, good morning to you. You're just in time for our first panel discussion of the morning, featuring private sector perspective on the ease of doing business. This is the final call, ladies and gentlemen. If I could kindly ask you to take your seats once again. I hope you found the refreshments and the networking during the break to be invigorating. We are now ready to move into the core of our program and get to the real meat of the day. We begin our working sessions with our first panel discussion titled Private Sector Perspective on Ease of Doing Business. The theme of this forum is Breaking Barriers Enabling Business. And there is no better way to understand those barriers than by hearing directly from the business leaders who navigate them daily. This session is designed to set the stage for our afternoon breakout groups, where we will dive into specifics like business entry, taxation, and international trade. As you would have noticed, I've broken from the lectern. There's someone else there. I now turn your attention to the monitors for the moderator and panelist introductions. Take a look. Moderator, Dr. Thomas Samuel. Dr. Samuel is an economist and veteran public servant with extensive expertise in international trade and macroeconomic policy. During his tenure in the Ministries of Finance, Commerce, and External Affairs, he specialized in sectoral development and research. As the former Director of International Trade, he spent over 15 years shaping trade policy and representing St. Lucia within the OECS, CARICOM, and the World Trade Organization. In addition to his public service, Dr. Samuel has served as an adjunct lecturer in economics at the University of the West Indies and Monroe College. He currently advises the Ministry of Commerce on trade logistics and competitiveness as an UNCTAD-trained member of the National Trade Facilitation Committee. He has also contributed his expertise to various statutory boards and the Caribbean Public Research Institute. Panelists: Andrea St. Rose, President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Eastern Caribbean St. Lucia Branch. St. Rose brings over 20 years of experience in legal accounting and business advisory services. A former partner at BDO St. Lucia, she now serves as a consultant to BDO Eastern Caribbean and sits on the boards of several regional institutions. An expert in governance and dispute resolution, Andrea is a certified fraud examiner, chartered governance professional, and accredited mediator and arbitrator. She is the current president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Eastern Caribbean and the immediate past president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Caribbean. She holds an LLB honors, a Master of Business Administration, and was called to the bar in England and Wales by the Honourable Society of the Inner Temple. Ansel Mathra, acting president of the St. Lucia Realtors Association, St. Lucia Inc. Mathra is a seasoned technology industry veteran with 23 years of regional experience in product development and marketing intelligence. His expertise spans commercial strategy, market research, and revenue growth, with a proven track record in new product introduction and customer lifecycle management. Currently, Mathra operates as a commercial consultant and technopreneur with a diverse portfolio of interests across real estate, media, education, fashion, and fintech. He leverages his extensive background in data-driven strategy to drive innovation and sustainable development within these sectors. Gerard Begas, representative of the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. Gerard Begas oversees operations for tropical shipping in St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Dominica, and Grenada as regional manager. A dedicated advocate for trade facilitation and intra-regional trade liberalization, he co-authored the 2016 CARICOM report on business facilitation mechanisms. Begas holds a bachelor's in electrical engineering and an MBA from the University of Toronto, a master's in shipping and logistics from Middlesex University, and earned his chartered director designation in 2024. He serves on the board of Republic Bank EC Limited and is a past president of the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce. His extensive public and private sector leadership includes past roles with SLASPA and the National Insurance Corporation, and he currently chairs the National Competitiveness and Productivity Council while representing the private sector on the National Trade Facilitation Task Force. Paula James, Executive Director, St. Lucia Manufacturers Association. Paula James is a seasoned professional with over 30 years of experience in the banking sector and a distinguished record of public service. Since 2012, she has served as the Executive Director of the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association, where she champions the growth, competitiveness, and strategic interests of the local manufacturing sector. In this capacity, she leverages her extensive background in finance and policy to advocate for industry development and trade-related initiatives. Her leadership is supported by a strong foundation in governance, having previously served as chairman of the Tax Appeal Commission and as a commissioner on the Public Service Commission for the Government of St. Lucia. She brings specialized expertise in project management, VIP protocol, and public service regulations to her executive role. Ron Leon, President of the St. Lucia Bankers Association. Ron Leon is a senior banking official and chartered director with over 16 years of experience in retail banking, compliance, and enterprise risk. He is currently the senior manager at Republic Bank EC Limited, providing strategic oversight across 7 territories, including St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Martin. His expertise spans the redesign of anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism frameworks, the management of regional automated clearinghouse operations, and the delivery of major capital projects, such as the bank's regional head office. A former regulator with the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of St. Lucia, Mr. Leon brings a unique dual perspective to his work in corporate governance and regulatory discipline. He has successfully guided the institution through numerous regulatory examinations, achieving high compliance ratings while driving operational efficiencies and digital transformation. Leon holds a Bachelor of Science in Banking and Finance from the University of the West Indies and is a certified anti-money laundering specialist. He is an active contributor to regional financial stability, serving on the ECCU Bankers Association Risk Committee and co-chairing the ECCU Ease of Account Opening Working Group in collaboration with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Do give our panelists a warm welcome as they ascend the platform. Private sector panelists, we now welcome you to your cushy seating as we begin for intense dialogue. I now hand over to you, Dr. Samuel.
Thank you very much, Mistress of Ceremonies. As our panelists take their seats, let me take the opportunity to acknowledge in our midst the Honorable Prime Minister, Philip J. Pierre, who has joined us, and a round of applause to him. Honorable Prime Minister, we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us at this very important inaugural event. As we begin our session, we wish to adopt the protocol that has already been established with respect to the acknowledging the presence of the members of the cabinet and the regulators, senior representatives in government, etc. We have had our introduction to our panelists. I hope they are all settled, and before we get started, I hope they can all see me and hear me properly. Okay, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, on my own behalf, let me also say good morning and thanks to all of you for being here at this inaugural event, and for those of you joining us virtually at this event. As has been expressed by previous speakers, this event, as the title suggests, is really part of the thrust and priority of the government of St. Lucia through the Department of Commerce to try to qualitatively improve the business ecosystem in terms of the policy, legislative, and regulatory environment in which business is conducted in St. Lucia. In large measure, this exercise is really a culminating exercise following a tour de place that took place earlier in the year over the months of January and up to recently, in which the minister conducted a number of introductory stakeholder meetings with the private sector, in which the various issues and challenges faced by the sector were ventilated with a view to seeking resolution. So in our discussion, which will start in just a few moments, we will revisit some of those issues that, as the chairman, as Mr. Barnard said, has been long expressed, but sometimes have not been resolved or sustained. As we can see by our distinguished panel, we have brought together in one space some of the leading figures, those who really are at the commanding heights of our business sector in St. Lucia in various ways, with considerable experience, and are certainly well placed to provide, allow us to draw on their experience and their insights to provide inputs to this process. As was also said by the minister, there's a philosophical underpinning to the approach to which this has been done, and that is a participatory, consultative, collaborative approach in which all we co-create, as they say, we get to the line, the finish line together, where we have inputs, and it's transparent and participatory. So just be reminded, this is the underlying philosophy that underpins the approach to creating that environment that serves us all. Of course, there is an inherent tension, as was alluded to, in terms of the ongoing debate between the level of the right balance, that was used earlier on this morning, the right balance in terms of the level of regulation, whether it should be fit for purpose, not unduly onerous, but taking into account the interests of all stakeholders. With these few remarks, I want to now get into the substance of our discussion, but I want to also make the point that was made by the minister earlier more clearly, that whereas the World Bank has discontinued the ease of doing business index, which we used to be looking forward to in terms of our ranking, etc., and has moved towards what we heard as the Business Ready Index, there is still great value to pursue the objective of making the environment more conducive for conducting business. Okay? So some people think, why are we doing this? It is still very relevant because the challenges remain, notwithstanding that there's no more ranking. But I would have to say to you, there's an overlap and a lot of similarity between the old framework used by the World Bank and the current framework of the Be Ready Index. Both of them have 10 sub-indices, And a lot of the things that we want to improve in are also included in the new framework. But the only difference is, or the major difference being that the Business Ready framework is a more comprehensive, takes a more comprehensive look at business from the perspective of the business environment, taking into account social inclusion, the environment, environmental sustainability, and public service delivery, which is something we've been hearing about from many of the speakers before about the frustrations or dissatisfaction in the turnaround time to get licenses, permits, or approvals in the service. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to start to speak to my panel. The persons in our panel this morning they participated in, as I said earlier on, our various meetings in which the issues were presented. One of the issues that came out from the discussions with the private sector, especially the chamber and the manufacturers, was the issue of deficiencies in the workforce with respect to skills, the skills gap. And so how ready is our workforce to serve the needs of the private sector if the private sector is to be competitive? Okay, so against that backdrop, I want to ask Mrs. James if she could lead off the batting on this one, if she could share what I mean, bearing in mind, we have heard of the mismatch between the skills of school leavers and against the needs of the industry. So from your perspective, Ms. James, what are the critical gaps in to your mind? Is it technical competence? Is it work ethic? Is it soft skills, etc.? Bearing in mind, we have programs such as TVET, NSDC, NRDF, Institute, SALCC, and others. Okay, so what should we be doing? What are the partnerships between the private and public sector that we need to establish to address this skills gap? I hope I've given you a good leading. Over to you.
Good morning, all. I would not go through any protocol list so that we didn't spend the whole day here, but I would like to acknowledge the minister and our esteemed Prime Minister. For private sector, especially manufacturing, we have come a long way. I need to say that first because TVET has been a godsend for us. There are a lot of skills that are being taught through TVET. Our biggest challenge, however, is when these persons are finished, how do we reach them? How do we get in touch with them? Because there is no base. I shouldn't say there is. Right now, I found out sometime late last year, there are 3 different ministries collecting data of persons who have graduated in certain things. We looking for persons. Guyana has taken away most of our qualified persons in labs, and we have manufacturers with labs. So looking for persons with that chemistry background, that physics background, it was a challenge for us with regards to replacing that as quickly as possible because 3 of our largest manufacturers lost their persons going back to Guyana. We had a lot of Guyanese in that sector. And it was a big challenge for us finding them. But lo and behold, last year I found out 3 ministries are now collecting data. We never knew about this. So the communication between the ministries and the business sector is not very good. This needs to be improved. We would love to make sure that we can employ all our young persons in that field because there are quite a lot of them who come out of Sir Arthur with qualities. And for us, the challenge was there and it has been there for years.
Okay, thank you. To any of the panelists, feel free to weigh in on this one. What are your thoughts on this with respect to how effective do you believe our institutions are in imparting training to our school leavers that seek specialized supplementary education in after leaving school? Is there more to be done? Also, should businesses themselves be part of the solution rather than wait for an external provider to provide them with the skills that they are seeking. Anyone? Yes, go ahead.
If I may just accept the protocol that has already been established. I think that we should have in place a mentorship program so that businesses are incentivized to take on students during the summer vacation, for example, that they go for a training program, and that the students themselves benefit by getting credits towards whatever programs that they are attending at school. Not only would it enhance their skills as they enter the workforce, because generally speaking, from my experience at least, and from most of my colleagues, we find that the students coming in lack the skills, basic skills. And it places significant pressures on the resources that are available to train these people. We need to determine what are the sectors that we want to focus on. Is it financial services? Is it agriculture? Is it tourism? And then have the training programs where we can help our people develop in those areas. But I think this is something that should be given some consideration in terms of a mentorship program for school people so that they can get the skill sets, hands-on experience, that is.
Okay, thanks for that. We have to move along, but I would just entertain a final question to the panel. And again, it's open.
Can I say something on this?
Okay, go ahead.
For the last 5 years, I think we can safely say St. Lucia is going through a construction boom. And there's a huge opportunity for trades. The programs at South Arthur, plumbing, electricals, building tech, these needs are highly sought after. You can hardly get plumbers, and they make good money. The prices per day have gone up, I would say, by 50% now over the last 5 years. So I know South Arthur had a program like that. Coupled with your mentorship. At the end of that program, and with TVET, Ms. James, those students should be able to get work because there is work, there is demand. So if we can streamline and connect the program with TVET, South Arthur's program with TVET, and maybe layer a mentorship if needed, if possible. But right now, there is a dire need for trades, right now, today.
So that is a gap in the market. But would the response of institutions to fill that gap not come in with a lag that may still not meet the immediate needs of the industry? Because to train a person usually takes at least, there are short courses, but perhaps 3 months, 6 months or more sometimes, or even a year, depending on the level of competence and certification. So that is an issue. So we need to do forward planning rather than reacting. And I think that is a better approach, to anticipate. I think the point was made to identify core areas that are within our strengths, or we have comparative advantage, and to focus on those areas ex ante, before we rather than wait with a lag. If not, the market will not wait for us. So that is one. I just want to ask also my panelists, what about internships and apprenticeships, which is to be so widespread in earlier years, but we don't see as much? What do you think is affecting the lack of internships and apprenticeships?
Yeah. I think once upon a time, the comprehensive schools, which is the school that I attended, had an internship program. And this is where, and this is where I got hands-on experience when it comes to accounting. And I think that if most institutions would have in place these internship programs, and of course, provide some incentives to the businesses that take on these students, whether it be a tax credit for whatever salaries that has been paid to these people, I think that would be a very good idea. I'm not too sure if this is still in existence with respect to that program, but I think this is something that we really need to take on board. If we are thinking of, say, our country as a country that's going to be dealing with financial services, for example. We want to have trust legislation, yet still we do not have people who are skilled in those areas. So, but teaming these people with institutions that can provide that experience for them, would be an advantage in terms of getting them up and running soon as they enter the workforce, they are ready to go.
Okay, we take note of these recommendations. And we'll move on. In the interest of time, we'll move to another sort of subject area. No doubt in the breakout sessions that we have, we'll get a chance to revisit some of these topics in greater detail, and we'll have some action points coming out of them. So with your permission now, we'll now move to another area, which is a lingering grouse that has surfaced repeatedly in a lot of our meetings. It has to do with that sort of private sector interface with government in terms of seeking services at the various departments and the dissatisfaction either in the turnaround, interpretation of legislation, the requirements, in some cases, need for hard copies, manual systems as opposed to digitized systems which preclude the need to present yourself physically in offices, etc. So that is one of the areas that we have heard. Now, we have made some strides and we need to acknowledge, and I would like to know whether or not we have done, for example, the DigiGov system. I would like to get your reaction as to how that has been working for you, and perhaps you can give some feedback on it, because it is one of the things that governments around the world have been doing in trying to bring government services in a virtual space to access, to serve the needs of citizens. So my question again to all of my panelists is, where do you see duplication or inefficiencies with regards to the services provided by government, or what more do you think should be done, or can you point specifically to where you experience that, so I could, for want of a better word, dissatisfaction with the turnaround time for getting your permits, your approvals, and your licenses?
Okay, good day, everybody. Just for reintroduction, let me adopt the protocol already established. I am Ron Leo, President of the Bankers Association. I will speak particularly on a matter that impacts us as it relates to the land registry. And I know our legal fraternity is particularly interested in that as well. And I will not sit here today and pretend to have all the answers. But as our dear minister said at the beginning, we must air the concerns to understand where exactly we're moving forward. So I will take example from the amazing work that has been done with regards to movable security. We now have a situation where movable security is registered in a lot more efficient manner. We're able to register a vehicle, maybe a boat, and we have other forms of security that we can register, look up, ensure is in place in the right manner through technology, and that is through the work of this ministry and this government and the wonderful persons who have made this happen. So I do applaud those persons responsible for that. However, we seem to not be moving along the same lines where it relates to our immovable property. Now, this is not to indicate that we need a complete change in the legislation as it relates to how we get immovable security registered. So it's not a knock on the legal fraternity. I know we have lawyers here, right? We do believe that there is a place for lawyers before to ensure securities are perfected. However, the actual registration tends to be quite manual. We do not have access to it in a reliable manner. We seem to have interruptions in the service quite often. And again, I'm airing the concerns, not saying that I know exactly what is happening in the background and with the ministry. But this continues to pose a significant issue for the financial sector. As you would imagine, it is extremely important for us to be able to extend credit for the economy to move. Those wheels are highly dependent on us being able to extend credit. And one of the major things that we look at is property when extending credit. And if the main arm which deals with the registration of it is not moving in an efficient manner, then we continue to have those issues. So this is me airing the concern. I will leave it to the other panelists. I don't know if we have the actual answers here, but I will not pretend that I do.
Okay, I guess this is one of the issues that will be noted for further deliberation in our breakout session and elsewhere. While you have the floor, perhaps I'll ask you as well, Mr. Leon. I think reference has been made to what we call the incompatible legislation with respect to foreclosure. I guess, do you care to comment on this? Because it's impacting recovery, your recovery processes, and But bearing in mind our legal framework, and we don't want to put anybody on the streets. We don't want people. But the Insolvency Act of which was passed in September of 2024, I think, provides some safeguards to prevent us from causing people to lose their homes when they have issues with bad debt or to renegotiate debts in a way that sort of allows them not to find themselves homeless. So if you care to comment on this aspect of the challenge that the banking sector has repeatedly stated with us.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will comment on this one very, very carefully, because I understand this is an extremely sensitive topic. So I want to err and take my words very slowly. I will. Thank you, Prime Minister. We understand how important it is for persons to own a piece of St. Lucia. We understand at the end of the day, and we believe as citizens that it is our right, once we have that property, for it to be maintained as our property. That a financial institution should not have a complete autonomy to remove it if we fall into hardship. And I totally agree. However, what we do find is that there is an opportunity cost for allowing a blanket protection in such cases. And that is what we have, or at least that is what I would say we have at this particular point in time when it comes to foreclosure. We have blanket protection for all. And all do not fall into the vulnerable category of persons who have met misfortune. All do not fall into the vulnerable category of persons who are unable. So the question is, what exactly are we giving up by providing that blanket protection to persons? And the Bankers Association is currently working with the ministry, and we've estimated so far that at the very minimum, and this is using mainly banks, not including a lot of our credit unions, which is a major part of the sector, that we have an estimated 1.4 billion of liquidity that cannot be utilized in this country because we decided that it is absolutely necessary to provide blanket protection to all. That's funds that are tied up in derelict property. I'm sure Anselm could tell. We see property, we pass it on the road all the time, and we wonder, but what's really going on with this? Why nobody can get this and turn it into something that's useful in the economy? It's tied up in a bank somewhere or financial institution somewhere, right? We see it all the time, and it is costing us. So the question is, how do we find a balance? And I look at the table with our dear Prime Minister and the Minister, and I know this is a sensitive topic again. But how do we find a balance? And the Bankers Association truly believes there is a need to find a balance. Not to protect all, but protect the persons who really need the protection. The banks and the financial institutions are not in the business of taking persons' assets. Actually, it's not beneficial to us. It is more beneficial to ensure that the persons continue to service the debt. However, to find that balance, we believe that we must or we should establish some level of a threshold. And we are now working with the ministry to determine what that threshold will be, where we say, okay, we are able to give a financial institution a little more autonomy once that loan or that impaired asset is maybe above 400,000, 500,000. At that particular point in time, we should be able to say that the financial institution will have a little more autonomy to recover on this because it is impacting our sector on a whole.
Okay, thanks for that response. Yes, I think perhaps the idea of a threshold to delineate those that are vulnerable from those that are not, perhaps can be part of the solution, but we will not pretend to solve it right here, but we take the point that you have made. In the interest of time, I really want to move on. I just want to wrap up with you, Mr. Leon, quickly. There are people who have asked some really basic questions about the frustrations of having to provide two pieces of ID, for example, and to be able to open an account or to do a number of things in the bank. Is this absolutely necessary? Is the risks? Is it the AML, CFT compliance requirements? What really is this? And if what else can be done to give access? Because you bear in mind, most people's IDs are either a passport, a driver's license, or what's the other one? Birth certificate or something like that.
National ID.
National ID. But those who don't drive or who perhaps have an expired passport would be inherently disadvantaged. So, I mean, this should be something we can at least harvest in the short term. What say you? And before you speak, I just want to, because I want to move on to my other panelists, I just want to also ask you, the problem that we have heard where some small sole traders or business concerns have had difficulty accessing bank loans in the banks because of concerns of either lack of succession planning, their age, and so on, and the business suffers as a result of that. Could you speak also on to that subject? What can be done to allow businesses, which are separate legal persons, juridical persons, to benefit from accessing funds, and they are not penalized because of the age of the owners? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to be efficient with my answer because I know we have to move to open questions. With regards to the banks and the requirements, particularly in opening accounts, I know it has been a sore point for quite some time. I will give brief context and where we are now. Brief context is yes, it has been an AML, CFT, CPF issue. For quite some time, the banks have understood that the issue with IDs has been providing an identification and verifying it by another form. That notion has been well dispelled, and I will again congratulate the FIA, the ECCB on dispelling that notion. However, I think we still have some archaic policies, so it's no longer an issue of legislation that needs to be changed in that instance. But I do know that we have some policies which need to be amended. So the Bankers Association is looking at this matter, and it is one that we will continue to address to ensure that we're all on the same page, because you find that in some institutions, that is not an issue with one form of ID. However, in others, you will see a mandate for two forms. There are other requirements that continue to pose an issue to the populace, that being proof of address, proof of income, and again, I could go into quite a few bits of details with regards to that. But here, I believe that we do need some more collaboration, not only with the policies within the financial institutions, but also with the guidelines and legislation that guide them. So while we've cleared the issue with regards to IDs, I do believe that there are more matters that we need to bring to the table, that we need to clear up so that the financial institutions and the regulators are working on the same page. That's my short answer. With regards to the business community and extending credit, so we do see sometimes that we have very viable businesses that are operating well in the economy. And they approach our financial institutions only to find that there is a hesitance to extend the credit because we look at the proprietor or the main principal, and we have determined that because the mind management and complete knowledge on the operation of that business is solely, for the most part, reliant on that person, we are challenged to extend credit at a very extended tenure, 10, 20 years, if we are of the view that that person is of age and there will be limited to no succession to carry that business forward. So the question is, how do we manage this problem? And I think it's really an education and a culture shift that we need to adopt. A lot of our businesses are manned and owned by persons who are within that age bracket. And it should not be a situation where we stifle those businesses because we look at one person. However, we have to make those persons understand that it is important to extend the knowledge, whether it be to the family members, whether it be to management, so that the business is not essentially meeting its end prematurely because they are unable to carry it over for an exceeded amount of time. Again, my short answer to that.
Thank you very much for that, and we do take note of your suggestions and comments on this subject. If we could pivot at this point, I want to now move into a new direction, another of the recurring themes and issues that have been brought to the fore by in our consultation with the private sector. And here I refer to the issue of delays at the ports, issues with customs, and in terms of getting clearances and release of containers, and how that is affecting business. So with that, I would like to, we're talking about infrastructure as well, traffic and logistics as well. with that very topical issue of, congestion at the ports and etc., I would like to ask Mr. Gerhard Begas, who is wearing two hats here on this panel, both as the representative of the Chamber, but also our leading expert on matters relating to shipping. What do you think should or can be done to improve turnaround times, to reduce delays really at the port? Because this is a concern that we have had. We are aware of the congestion issues. We have heard of, like space constraints, sometimes equipment failure, and so on. But there's also the issue of the labor arrangements with stevedores, which is a long-standing issue, unions and the instructions to the stevedores. All of these things are in the mix in affecting the actual overall release time. Now, I want to go even further and say we have, which something you would be very much aware of, the FAL Convention, which really deals with the sort of standardizing the facilitation and treatment of ships when they enter ports, so that, with respect to the information that is provided to the Port Authority, so that to minimize delays. So I've given you quite a bit of a context here, and this is something, a constraint on business. It's affecting the speed of delivery to their customers, and logistics is critical to being competitive, to maintaining your service delivery standards and so on. So as we try to improve the ease of the environment for doing business, a critical part of that is how we facilitate the movement of goods from the ship to warehouses and eventually to customers. So could you comment, Mr. Begas, from your very considered experience, on what you think can be done better to address this challenge?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Protocol already being established. I would like to start off first by saying thank you to the ministry for convening this session, because this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. When I was president of the Chamber back in 2011, this was something I spoke almost non-stop and exclusively about, using the World Bank report to drive reform to make it easier to do business in St. Lucia. So I think this is a very timely session, and thank you, Ministry, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. The question you've asked me there would probably take up the rest of the day because you've covered a lot of ground, and there's some very contentious issues involved. But maybe I should start at a very high level, and on behalf of the Chamber, perhaps coin a new phrase, and that is institutional infrastructure upgrade. I heard the minister, I heard Mr. Barnard, and I heard our colleagues from the Bar Association basically say the same thing in different ways, that our institutions need to be better at serving the business community. So, and this is not a matter of just simply training. This is talking about a cultural shift in the ministry. A few weeks ago, I was lucky enough to be part of the minister's address to the Chamber, and I heard him outline a very detailed, very good strategy for the ministry. But to quote Peter Drucker, Minister, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we need to address the cultural issues to get our institutions, and I'm not just speaking about ministries here, but all of the institutions, into that mindset. And with that said, I will get to the port, I promise. But I have a couple suggestions. Minister, you said more St. Lucians should own St. Lucia. So I want to extend that logic a little bit. And
I hate to interrupt, but I just say that because of time, and I know you have a lot to say, and the issue of owning St. Lucia, we will address it even more fully with one of our other panelists.
I'm extending the logic here because honestly, I think more St. Lucians should participate in governance of these institutions. And many years ago, the government used to come to the private sector organizations and ask for nominees to sit on various boards. That doesn't happen anymore. And the board members at those institutions are politically appointed. And there are enough private sector organizations in here, just looking around this room, I see several of them, that the government should be going to private sector organizations and asking for recommendations to sit on this board. Tap into the expertise of the private sector to help with the governance structures of these institutions. So coming back to the port now, which is really what you wanted me to talk about, I promised Mr. Snack that I would go light on SLASPA today. So, Mr. Snack, I apologize wherever you're sitting. With SLASPA, probably the biggest issue is that SLASPA is both a regulator and an operator. And that model does not work anywhere. And my view, and I've said this many times over the years, is that SLASPA should be a regulator, and we should set up a special purpose entity to be the operator of the ports. And that way, should the government so wish or desire to concession out the operation of the port at a later date to a private entity, they already have the mechanism to do that. And drilling down a little bit further into with SLASPA, I want to congratulate SLASPA on setting up the inland empty depot. That has helped ease the congestion on the port significantly. But the problem with empty evacuation at the port is partly caused by the way that SLASPA charges the carriers for storage of containers on the port. And it is like for example, tropical shipping, it is in our interest to get the oldest boxes off the port first. And so when the ship comes in, you're trying to dig for containers that are buried in the stack, which takes time, which is wear and tear on equipment. To get at those older boxes, it slows down the operation. It creates a less productive, less efficient operation. So we had suggested to SLASPA a few years ago to follow what is happening in Trinidad and Barbados and change that system, allocate based on their port square footage, a number of empties that any carrier can keep in the port at any one time. And anything above that, they get billed for. That way, there is no perverse incentive to dig for old containers. You take whatever is available. The operation will speed up. You will see a reduction in congestion on the port. And this is not a new idea. It is happening in Trinidad and it is happening in Barbados. The other thing, you mentioned the labor arrangements. That is a gigantic issue, which I would prefer to set aside.
We could take it in the breakout session.
Yes, that is a huge issue. But on a very simple matter, something else SLASPA can do is to articulate a clear berthing policy for ships coming into the port. To date, the berthing policy is cruise takes precedent. Every cargo carrier thinks that SLASPA is favoring every other cargo carrier because there's no clear berthing policy. And the berthing policy could be as simple as first come, first served. But I think that is something that could also help the situation there. Single window is another issue that has been on the cards for numerous years. I had the opportunity to brief our minister on this in great detail a couple of weeks ago. So I think he is well aware of the issues. But I think this is something we need to implement. And I see the Comptroller of Customs here, and they are in process of setting up a system for electronic release of cargo, which I take my hat off to you. I think it's a great initiative. And we've been wanting to do this for years. That will reduce human error and improve the security of the release of cargo into the public. So I think it's a great initiative. And we look forward to that being implemented ASAP.
While you're at it, is there any scope for short-term remedies in terms of changing operational hours to include working post the 4:30? We seem to have some systemic rigidity of everything must be out by a certain time and so forth. What about working longer into the night?
I don't think there's an issue of working longer into the night, because SLASPA will work at whatever time they need to work. The issue comes back to the labor arrangements, because it is extremely high cost to work in overtime. And as I said, this can be taken up in the breakout sessions. But to adjust that, you really need to look at the labor arrangements which have been in place and are structured around a regime that existed pre-containerized cargo.
Yes.
And a lot of what's in those arrangements relate to that type of operation, which for the most part, no longer exists. So modernizing those arrangements, I think, is a big one that could also help.
In the interest of time, I would just like you to make a final comment, but to do with one of the perceived, there's a view, that, as I have indicated to you before, that there is still a missing link in our shipping options in the islands, especially for what we call less than container load cargo, LCLs. Years ago, we used to have schooners, the Federal Maple and Federal Palm, that used to ply the waters of the islands, bringing trade between the islands. We have lost that service. We have heard of complaints where we need to actually, get the Miami-based carriers, and their schedules to serve for us to be able to get consignment of goods to Martinique and to St. Vincent and so on. So I would like you to comment on this and tell us whether you think this is really an issue. And I want to also say to you that this issue has been discussed widely in the region at the OECS Commission and CARICOM elsewhere. Studies have been done on it, we have had proposals, and I would like you to also comment. If you believe there is such a gap, what approach we should consider taking in terms of financing? Is it a PPP option, for example, fully private sector, etc.? This is an issue that I think we are begging for an answer. So I would like to hear from you on this. Thank you.
Yet again, another huge issue. You're right, it has been studied. I have done my own research on this. This was the subject of my master's thesis. So I know the subject very well. It is a complex issue, but I want to state unequivocally that the issue is not one of capacity. So when I hear you talk about Federal Maple and Federal Palm, I get a little queasy.
Yes.
It is not one of capacity, and the greatest evidence I can give you of that is that every island in the Caribbean, save possibly Trinidad, exports empty containers. So that means there is a lot of capacity available for the exportation of cargo. The issue boils down to, it is a complex issue, and we can get more into this in the breakout session, but the problem is that we do not have consolidation and deconsolidation facilities in the islands to facilitate that trade. And this, to me, is where the investment needs to happen. And I would suggest to you that perhaps, I don't think it should be down to the government to make this investment. Perhaps the government creates the environment that encourages the investment in that type of facility. And I will tell you, for refrigerated cargo, so produce moving around the region, there are perhaps 2 or 3 islands in the Caribbean with facilities to handle refrigerated LCL. Barbados is one of them. And so guess what? They have a refrigerated LCL service into Barbados. So that is the short answer, and I don't want to minimize the issue because it is a big issue. The short answer is that we need the deconsolidation and consolidation facilities at the destination.
Okay, thank you for that. We would certainly be discussing this important matter in greater detail in our breakout session, and it'll be certainly part of the work agenda of the ministry or department going forward. I would like to move along and turn our attention to another issue, but it's more in the service area. I think we've spent a lot of time on the goods, and here I want to talk about how our professional service providers, such as our accountants, auditors, and professionals, have difficulty in competing sometimes because of either legislative deficiencies, outdated legislation that needs review, and you know how long that takes. We have issues of not having, for example, tax appeal board, and what the uncertainty that causes in dispute resolution. We have issues of coordination. We have, for example, different interpretations of our legislations regarding the Companies Act and so forth. Beyond that, we have the problem of cross-border trade and services, where we try to compete and get business from outside, and in some cases, the absence of what they call a double taxation agreement with some states may undermine our competitiveness, affect our ability to actually lock in business, and so on. So with all of these concerns, I would like to invite Ms. Andrea Centrose, our very experienced panelist, who also wearing many hats, to react or comment on these challenges being faced by the accounting and auditing fraternity. Over to you, Ms. Centrose.
Okay, so thank you. I first want to say that ahead of this meeting, what we did as an Institute of Accountants was to solicit feedback from our members. And so some of the views I may express today are not necessarily my own, but comes from our membership. We have a number of issues. First of all, I need to piggyback on what Gerard just said with respect to culture. And we can first start out by reviewing the telephone service that exists when trying to reach various government ministries. You could hardly get to speak to someone in a government ministry. So I'm not too sure if it's anything to do with the service provider, or is it just that people just don't bother answer the telephones. But it's very difficult getting hold of anyone in any of these departments. Some of the areas I want to focus on would have to deal with mainly amendments to our taxation legislation. Currently, there is a need to review the penalty rates that are applied. For example, if one doesn't file taxes on time, there's a 5% late filing. And if you pay late, there's a 10%, and there's a 1.025% per month, which works out to about 12%. This was in place in the days where you had double-digit interest rates being paid on accounts. So it was a way of, compensating for the opportunity cost of the interest on the monies that the government would have visited. So generally speaking, we figure there's a need to revisit these rates because people want to pay their taxes. But when it becomes prohibitive, there's a difficulty. If people might say, you know what, it is already so high, I'll wait till the next amnesty. And of course, amnesty is not sustainable. And with that said, Mr. Minister, I need to thank you for the past amnesty extension that you have provided. I am pleased to say that often when we speak to you as an institute, you listen to us. So I want to thank you for that. So I think this is number one on the agenda that we need to revisit. And in light of the eroding personal income tax base, consideration should be given to reviewing and getting rid of personal income tax totally, because it is a strain on most businesses in terms of administratively burdensome. I know, Mr. Minister, the whole concept of VAT is a sensitive issue, but coming from my members, what they're saying is that let us get rid of all the administrative work, because the tax base is reducing. Fishermen don't pay tax, taxi drivers don't pay tax, farmers don't pay tax, And as it stands right now, if you earn a basic, say, $65,000 per annum, you end up paying no taxes if you can take full advantage of the $40,000 exemption. So we are saying, let us get rid of that. Let us focus a lot more on the VAT, get rid of the H&S levy, increase the VAT rate, so that, but bear in mind the lower income people to make accommodations for them, and so that the Inland Revenue Department now can spend time focusing on the bigger issues dealing with corporations. Small businesses. We had said previously that the economy is fueled by small businesses, but small businesses end up paying the same corporation tax as a big business. And we think that some accommodation should be made because the small businesses are not in a position to take advantage of the many incentives that are available to the larger businesses. We want some attention to be paid to that as well. We need some immediate amendments to our certain legislation, that is the IBC legislation. In particular, we speak of insolvency. In particular, the one that deals with reinstatement of companies. As it stands right now, the courts have differing views in terms of the legislation. Some judges will say, yes, I have the authority to reinstate. Some will say not. We need to get that done ASAP because we have a number of companies right now that are in a bay, and some of those that own properties and they are not able to deal with those properties. With respect to double taxation, in this current era of minimum global taxes, while it is of less impact, most of the companies in our region do not probably cannot take advantage of the global minimum tax of 5%. So we are asking that some sort of initial work commence with respect to negotiation of some treaties. Because most times when a company wants to do business in our jurisdiction, the first thing they will ask, do you have any treaties? Meaning that if I get income and my income is taxed in your jurisdiction, it's going to be taxed again in my other jurisdiction. Is there some sort of a reciprocal arrangement, so to speak, to minimize that impact? So we can start the discussion. We have certain legislation that is not very clear, and in particular, that is our economic substance legislation. And some of the requirements in that legislation, really, we don't understand what is the importance of that. For example, there's a requirement in that piece of legislation that requires businesses to have meetings in St. Lucia in person. And in this day of technology where you can have business virtually, it makes our environment a little less attractive. So there are little things in there that we want to have a look at. Even the legislation itself is not clear. And even when we try to reach out to the Inland Revenue Department, there are areas that still very gray. And because of that, it makes our jurisdiction highly uncertain. And if we and our marketing arm do not do what has to take place, we find ourselves in a situation where the foreign jurisdictions are actually providing negative information on our jurisdiction. For example, when we got rid of the 1% tax exempt election on companies, we have a 30% across the board tax. A lot of our companies left St. Lucia and they went to Barbados in particular, and some of the BVI islands, because they are of the view that in St. Lucia got rid of that preferential tax of 1% election, and they say in St. Lucia, all companies pay taxes at 30%. When in truth and in fact, the communication has not gone out to say your foreign sourced income is not subject to tax. So if it is the case that you have all your income is foreign source, then effectively tax is not paid. But that information is not getting out there. So we need to get that sorted out and have some certainty in that regard. We spoke about education in general. Under our legislation, we have certain things that makes our jurisdiction very attractive. For example, like I spoke earlier on, the foreign sourced income. But we are not doing enough in terms of educating the business community over there that this is what we have. We have no taxes on dividends. We have a lot. We do not have many restrictions on foreign exchange expatriation. Whereas Barbados, for example, Trinidad have serious restrictions, yet still we don't use that to leverage attracting business in our jurisdiction. I will leave the matter of legislation to my colleagues, the lawyers, but in a nutshell, Mr. Minister, I'm hoping that we can take some of these on board, in particular, the income tax legislation.
Great, thank you. We want to wrap up now. I want to hear from one of our other panelists and to move again to another subject area, and that is the subject of the realtors sector. The real estate as an economic activity is a really important and growing one in our economy. It contributes about 10 to 11% of GDP, and which translates to about $600 million in real GDP per annum. However, given our limited landmass and growing population, the government has an express policy intention to ensure and increase the level of St. Lucian participation in the sector in a manner that ensures that they are not just spectators but owners of a lot of the resources of the country, and are actively are the ones primarily involved as agents in certain activities such as the sale and rental of houses and villas and other such properties, accommodations that have been reserved for nationals. We have some the sector must contend with some of the regulation, which deals with the need for a trade license in some instances, and the need to comply with the Aliens Landholding Act on the other hand. With that in mind, Mr. Ansem, if you care to comment on how do you think the current arrangement supports the twin objectives that we have laid out? The objective of ensuring St. Lucian participation on the one hand, and ensuring that the sector is viable and attractive, that investors can find it worth their while to invest in the sector. Do you think the minimum investment or threshold for locals is too high, and so on? Although we note that a significant number of a lot of St. Lucians are participating in the sector with up to properties valued as high as 5 million. Okay, so I would like your comments on that twin objective.
Okay, thank you again, moderator. We believe that the current framework with the Alien Landholdings License and the Trade License Act, we think that the policy is sound in its intent. The fact that real estate transactions and brokerages is reserved for only nationals, we think that was welcome. We think it puts St. Lucians at the center of a very, very important sector. Our issue is when it comes to timeliness, the processing, and the multiple agencies that we need to work with. As a small developer, I have buyers who would have waited between 5 and 7 years on a small scale. Larger agencies within our sector would probably have clients waiting longer. The issue with us trying to attract high-end while preserving our own guardrails is that property transactions, people cannot give a timeline, and so it's unpredictable. Our high-end buyers need predictability, consistency, and clarity. Another issue we have is that because of that, development timelines are also impacted because people are not able, for myself, we're not able to finish a project if we don't know where our sales are coming from. And a large portion of our sales outside of the diaspora would be persons requiring an alien landholding license. So the other issue you raised was the issue of the minimum threshold. As it stands now, and we're grateful for the Ministry of Commerce, great consultations. We had a meeting with the minister a couple of weeks ago with some proposals, which we are going to meet again. Currently, we believe those thresholds are a bit high. And it's not that our nationals cannot participate. there are some challenges there. I think we're looking at the figure of about 5 million US as the entry point of a non-national. We are still working with the ministry. Our current information among our members is that the mean to average purchase price point of property by foreigners is in the region from $500,000 US. So setting a threshold of 5 million is 10 times, and it's way, way above what normal realtors would be transacting. So they would lose 80, 90% of their sales. Notwithstanding, there is an opportunity for us to improve the ability of locals to participate large-scale projects and bigger ventures, and that would require easier access to capital, because real estate is capital intensive. Now, we are aware of the imminent launch of the Credit Bureau, National Credit Bureau, and we're assuming that will assist more people in qualifying and the bank being more willing to advance larger loans to local developers. Of course, there's the opportunity and the need for more partnerships to allow that scaling. So all in all, as an industry, our members are concerned about the thresholds. However, respect and accept the need for solutions to participate and to own the sector and to benefit from it. As a contributor of more than 11% to the GDP, we accept and we appreciate being reserved, being the ones reserved to transact business, but we believe that the consultations that we have with the ministry will ultimately get us to a point where both parties are comfortable, where locals have a safe space to operate and a high enough space. And I've always said that I don't see any large-scale investments, projects by locals, but with the new framework coming in banking, we hope that will change. But all in all, we expect that with consultations with the ministry, we'll be able to get to a level where our members are happy and the government believe that they are achieving the objectives.
Thank you very much for your remarks. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we have run out of time. I'm under instructions from my timer, and I'm told that we need to wrap up. So I would just like to say special thanks to our panelists for their candor and their recommendations as to how we can address the various challenges that we discussed. We hope this is not the end, as it is, as I say, just a beginning, and a lot of these matters will be further distilled in a number of discussions that we would have in breakout sessions and subsequent engagement between the ministry and your associations. Okay, so with that, I want to thank the audience. I would have liked to have, I'm not sure if we could have any questions from the floor at this time.
Proceed.
Proceed?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yes, we can take one or two questions from the floor if anyone would like to ask any question to our panelists before they vacate the stage. Can somebody assist in providing the mic if anyone has a question on any of the topics we have discussed today? Okay, as they say, there being none. We have a comment from one of our panelists. Okay, Ms. James, you have the floor.
Mine is not a question. It's an appeal to every ministry before I leave the floor. Single window is really single window to us as business. And the draft legislation has been there for over 17 years. We cannot keep meeting and re-meeting and coming back and not making a final decision. A decision must be taken with single window. It will assist us, the chamber, and anybody doing business. And my other one is the ease of doing business. It's not just words. Because when I drop a piece of document in a ministry and you ask me to come back on Tuesday, I leave my business, I come back on Tuesday, the person to sign is not there. That has nothing to do with me. As a business, I need to get the document signed. I need to clear something from customs. My birth certificate in the registry, I should not be walking 5 times to get something done, and that is my experience 2 weeks ago. To get 3 copies of a birth certificate, I went to the registry 5 times. I said to the lady on the 4th time, darling, go back and tell your supervisor, do a checklist. So when I come the first time, you tell me I need to come with this. The person that I'm getting the copy of the death certificate is deceased. He was my ex-husband, my husband, and I had to get documents to do a lot of things with his property. And this was a nightmare. And this should not be walking back and forth 5 times. Every time I come, you ask me for another piece of document. So do a checklist. This is what you need for a deceased person, or this is what you need for somebody changing their business name. So when I come to you, you give me that one document, I get everything, and then I come back to you. Don't tell me come back on Tuesday, and when I come on Tuesday, you send me back for 4 other pieces of document. Come back on Wednesday with it, and you send me back again another week. This is not the ease of doing business. So these are the 2 things I'm passionate about, because the business community, it is driving them up the wall. Thank you.
And with that, thank you very much, Ms. James. I think the applause, spontaneous applause from the floor does say that this point resonates with many of them. With this, we'd like to bring our session to a close and thank our panelists for their very insightful remarks. And certainly, as we have promised, a lot of what you have said will find its way as part of the work program and going forward. As the minister says, by this time next year, we hope that we would have harvested some fruit, at least some of the low-hanging fruit, from some of what has been proposed. As we are aware, some of what we have to do involves legislative reform of our legislation and regulation, which is longer and will take us a longer time, but we have to be committed to achieving these goals. Thank you very much for your attention this morning.
A round of applause to our moderator, Dr. Samuel, and our esteemed panelists.
Okay, I've been given some latitude to have even more questions. So the floor is still open to take a question from anyone else who wish to speak to us.
Are you able to take questions from online?
Yes, of course, we can.
All right, great. I put a question in the Q&A, but I can speak it. So thank you for the opportunity. As a St. Lucian citizen living abroad, I see the diaspora as a real opportunity for St. Lucia, both in terms of revenue creation and knowledge sharing. However, the challenges around doing businesses, especially the conversations about the formation of businesses, the requirements, the hardship of doing business in St. Lucia, as well as staffing challenges, can be really discouraging. What is the thought about how the people in the room, the people who are in the room where things happen, what can be better done to engage and leverage this population, meaning those of us in the diaspora who are looking to come back and give back, not just knowledge, but also from a revenue or finance perspective?
Okay, thank you for your question. I will now invite anyone from our panel to take a stab at it. I think the question really was, she outlined the challenges experienced by persons in diaspora seeking to participate in the economy in various ways, either providing knowledge, assisting with revenue creation, and so forth. But there are some challenges, and she would like to see what can be done to assist people like her in the diaspora to better participate. I hope I got that right.
I mean, I could add one response. I'm familiar with the lady, quite accomplished St. Lucian. In my small niche of development, 90% of my sales are from diaspora. So what I do, I take on the interested client and I walk them through. I put them in touch with a lawyer. architects, surveyors. So I am that link, but that's a small scale. I think the question that she's asking is about, from abroad, how can she access services easily because she has a contribution to make. Now, what I was thinking, Minister Hilaire, was process improvement. Can that be a department as opposed a department that cuts across ministries as opposed to each ministry trying to have their own efficiency optimization? And I'm asking that because a number of groups, it will be the interface for a number of groups. We all have people in the diaspora who want to do something, whether it's opening a bank account, purchasing property, starting a business, and they each have their own individual journey. I do recognize the work done by the DigiGov. It has made a difference. But then again, if DigiGov, responsiveness, Mr. Nassi is always responsive. But then again, responsiveness in the actual process might be limited. So I don't know, bankers, Andrea, from your perspective in dealing with St. Lucians who want to contribute, how do you manage?
Okay, so I'll speak from, you want to go, Andrea? Go, Andrea. I'll speak from the perspective of the banks. In some instances, we actually do see that persons in the diaspora, and some may see, are favored in somewhat, even when looking at real estate investment. And that is because you tend to have persons from the diaspora demonstrate capacity to repay very well. And again, it goes to culture, right? However, the places where we see disadvantages particularly is in relation to just the establishment of an account, right, in a financial institution. The level of requirements that we have in place currently do increase when we look at persons from the diaspora. Why is that? I think a lot of persons in the room understand. We have an appetite that is different from a risk perspective for persons who are out of the country. Now, is this something that needs to be revised? Should it be relooked? I do think so. Because you have persons who were born here, probably lived here for quite some time, now working overseas, but they may not have the complete benefits that someone who continues to reside here has. It is not something that we could solve entirely ourselves because it does come down to international agreements and expectations. So we spoke earlier, and the minister touched earlier on things that are happening overseas and out of our control. So I don't want to go into that too much, but there are some matters that we could look at. And I will focus on what we can do. Assess those persons from a national perspective. And that comes to our regulators. I know I've worked quite a bit with the ECCB in this regard. The FIA, I know, has been doing some work. Our NAMLOC has done some work. But we can do a lot more in assessing who should be determined as a low-risk person, even outside of the country. Why should a person who was born here be determined as high risk in any way? Because that person just decided, you know what, I might benefit a little more from having a career over the waters, right? So that in itself would give us some more autonomy as financial institutions if we acknowledge that from a national perspective, and yes, we can do that individually, there is an understanding, and it is documented, that those persons do not pose a higher risk to any financial institution. It eases the business across the board, as opposed to an individual financial institution trying to do it on their own, and then probably coming into loggerheads with the regulator at a later point.
I could make it even easier for the individual. We have a number of professional services firms in St. Lucia that could assist you from start to finish. So it's a question of accessing online, professional service providers in St. Lucia. Some of them, I must say, can provide everything, both legal and financial services. So you go to that one person. Others specialize in, legal and probably just financial services. But we have the facilities available to assist people overseas who are interested in doing business in St. Lucia.
Okay, thank you. So what we are hearing is a private sector solution as opposed to a government. Notwithstanding, I'm sure the government has someone responsible for diaspora affairs, so there can be that interface between government on the one hand and also the private sector to facilitate St. Lucians wishing to participate in the economy in various ways, whether in the real estate sector with, or otherwise, through a sort of a one-stop shop engagement approach. Okay, I think, okay, Mr. Bristol, we'll take a question.
Good morning, everybody, and I really would like to thank the Minister for arranging this forum, obviously the PS and her team as well, and I think the comments from the bar and Mr. Barnard have been all well placed. What's interesting today, though, is not just identifying the issues. I think what we lean into now is thinking about a difference in how we make decisions. So with respect to the comments from Andrea about the legislative changes, what we need is a timeline and mechanisms to make sure we initiate a response or a request that it is processed in a timely manner. With respect, however, to other things, I think we need to think more business-like, incisively. So for instance, with respect to the concerns about 11% contribution from our rentals and GDP and contributions, I think it's probably higher. I think we could get a lot more out of it by thinking differently. We don't need to try and rate somebody's property for Airbnb. That is done every day by their reviews and their number of stars and whether they are deemed to be superhost or not. And if you're in the Airbnb space, the most dangerous thing you can get is a bad review. It's worse than getting beat at primary school in the old days, because we don't do that anymore. But what's good about that is it makes everybody maintain the standards. Our problem might be leakages, where we have people who own properties here and do not pay taxes here because the funds are paid overseas. But if we were to partner with Airbnb, Expedia, VRBO, and let them add on 7%, 8%, let them provide remittances to us directly. Let them also provide remittances with the information saying who the owner of that property is and what account is paid to. You would not only get immediate taxation revenue commensurate with performance of the unit, what you'd also get is intelligence now to confirm that person has filed their tax returns, or if they're remitting the money outside of St. Lucia without paying tax, that you have an opportunity to increase your revenue collection. That, whether it's that or getting the land registry digitized, for which I have heard excuses for over 10 years as to why it's not done, and none of them are good enough. Again, we are making decisions where we are thinking very bureaucratically and process-oriented. But the minister said it, and I think everybody echoes it. We have the brain power in this island and in this room to solve our problems. We don't need external funding and international agencies to tell us how to fix problems like the land registry. We can fix them with the people in this room and in this country. So I think we need to think a bit more incisively. We need to trust ourselves and our skills. We do need to have consultations amongst ourselves and the right persons to get things going. But those decisions and that mindset is what we need to change today. And I think this forum is importantly the right step. I welcome it, but I do think that we must set some clear, tangible outcomes as to what we are going to tackle, how we're going to tackle it, when we deliver it by. But again, kudos to all the members, persons who attended. I must say I have been a gate crasher, as I had not formally registered. So I'd like to thank the PS for accommodating me at the back. Most of my time at school was at the back, so I'm very comfortable here. But importantly, again, thank you to everybody. I do think there's significant revenue opportunities, there's significant performance opportunities, and both of these go to the ease of doing business. And I give a simple one. Who wants to stand up outside of a land registry to pay $5, $10 for a land register versus going into your computer, logging on, and paying $20 with your credit card and getting it? We have the ability to do it. We have done it in the offshore registry for 26 years now, and we can bring that technology to St. Lucia anytime. And these are the initiatives and the sorts of things I think we need to harness and work together in a really positive forum and get the best out of this opportunity. So again, thanks to everybody, and I wish everybody a most productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these very useful remarks, Mr. Bristol. They are duly noted. We don't want to overstay our welcome. We want to keep the program going. So with that, I will now to invite our panelists and thank them again for their very, very insightful remarks. And I'd like to invite you to take your seats in the audience.
Thank you very much to our moderator and panelists for that insightful first session. It has provided us with a candid and essential look at the private sector's experiences. You've certainly given us a plenty of food for thought as we move forward.